I want to go like on the fringe of society and see what happens there. And it's often these people that I think have a story that we need to hear, because we maybe don't hear their stories so often. I wanted to be a photographer from when I was quite little. So my dad taught me how to develop film, and he was just like shooting lots of photos of my mom. They'd been together since they were 16, so I had like lots of memories of them falling in love. I remember when I was a kid, some of my good friends that I still have remember that I would always sit inside of their parents' living room and just look through their family photo albums, because I was so interested in it. And like they were going out to play, and I just wanted to look at these images in this photo album. And I think it has relevance to what I'm doing today, because I really like images that are like not staged and very close, like you see when you're in a family album. When I was a kid, I had OCD, which I still have. And I spent like from the age of 12 to maybe 22 just dealing with this obsessive compulsive disorder on my own and with therapists who didn't really know that this was OCD. And I later found out that like I have the most textbook OCD thoughts in the game. And that made me so angry that we hide stuff in society so that we go around as people and feel outside of the norm. And I think that's why I really want for us to be able to talk freely about stuff that's shameful, maybe, or not looked so well looked upon. For me, I think the main core is about being able to tell stories that can have an impact on the world and maybe change the way people see certain topics or think about stuff in the society. So it sounds a bit big, but I want to do something that's going to change the world just a little bit. During my career, stories have sort of just come to me and projects. So my first big project that I did was I followed a sex worker called Bonnie. I followed her when I was still in school for around 2 years and got very close to when she was having sex with clients, when she was at home with her kids. I worked kind of like an anthropologist almost, like I stayed there, slipped over. And I see that now as sort of a story that I would like to be able to break some prejudice with. Like, a sex work is actually legal here in Denmark. And so I think it was interesting to see a story of a person who worked in this field as a sex worker in prostitution, but still had so much prejudice hanging over her. So I work both with reportage series and portrait series. And you can say in portraits, you're allowed to be able to decide how this person is going to be portrayed. Is she going to sit? Is she going to lay down in some water? What's going to happen? But in reportage, I'm strictly the fly on the wall that observes what happens. But I think it connects to each other because I care so deeply about not photoshopping anything, not changing the way people look, like removing something from an image. So it has to be raw and real. So in that way, I think both the portraits and the series of reportage align with each other in some way. And I hope to always, also with the portrait, be able to tell way more than just one story, but like that you can have a story in a portrait when you look at it. Being a storyteller, we have an enormous power of what story we tell, because we're never objective. But you have to be very careful that you don't put your own story too much into what you're seeing. The education I come from in Denmark, I've studied in the States as well, they are more alert to that you have to be the sort of the case and then the photographer, that there has to be a line between you. And I think what's really unique about the schooling that I come from is that we don't work so much with those lines. We're more like just, you're a human and I'm a human, and we get close to each other. Of course, there needs to be some boundaries of like, if you get in an argument about if you said yes to doing something and you don't want to do it, you have to have some boundaries. But I think what's unique about my work and about the school that I come from is that we don't work so much with like contracts and release forms. It's more like human meeting another human. One of the biggest assignments I've had, I think, in my career was doing the front page of Time magazine, where I photographed the Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin. And you can say that she's like a very powerful political figure, and maybe more powerful than the subjects I usually portray. But still, she's a woman and she's young. And actually, just after I took the image, she had this whole ordeal about the video of her dancing and being like sensual or female or young. I don't know what the critique actually was. But so I think even though she's a powerful figure, she sort of fits into my line of work. I think a good portrait for me is both about having all the aesthetically things, so you think it's a beautiful image, but more about getting sort of the emotion in your gut when you see it, that you feel something. So it doesn't have to be perfect. You can have like a cord sticking out of someone's back or a tree sticking out of a head, that maybe some types of photographers would think were bad. But for me, it's way more about the emotions and how you connect with the people you see. We have some ideas about women's bodies that I want to explore and try to dive into, and maybe even be able to change a bit. In this series, The Girls from Malawi, I follow a group of young women, girls, who struggled with anorexia and bulimia, and I lived with them for about a month and ate with them and just was there. And they were struggling a lot. And this disease is horrible, and people die from it because the hearts can simply just stop, because the body is so out of function when they get so thin. So that was a sad but important story. But after I'd made that, I met the fat activism environment by chance, actually, and was so fascinated by this new power of looking at women's bodies especially women's, it's also all genders. But it made such an impact on me that I wanted to tell this story to the world, because I think it could inspire a lot of people to start looking at bodies just as the way you look. It doesn't have to determine who you are or how much worth you have as a person. And those women that I met in this series, they really taught me that. And I think we should all try and look at them in society and be inspired. I think I work with my self-portraits in sort of a hope that I can give a little bit back of what I sort of take when I do all my portraits of other people. I ask a lot of them. I ask them to trust me and to be naked in front of me. And I'm not like in any way as brave as they are, because when I do self-portraits, I have the control of what I put out there in the end. But I like working with my own body because I also want to sort of give a bit of my own insecurity and emotional baggage, because it's so much a part of what I do as a photographer is my emotions. So it's definitely not the most fun thing for me to do when I work with my self-portraits, but I still think it's important, and I'm trying to develop my artistic ways so that maybe in time I can be even more loose and not so perfectionist about the way that I portray myself. When I look back, I have a project that's from when I was in photojournalism school that I didn't want to put out there because I simply thought I looked so disgusting. And when I look at it now, I have it in my book Feminine. I'm just such a sweet little girl at 24. And I become very sad that I thought I was disgusting and I didn't want to put myself out there. I think there's a lot of my work that dives into this age pre-teen, because I think that's sort of the age where we sort of become women or become female. And that age was very groundbreaking for me as a kid, actually. I so wanted to be grown up. I wanted to become a woman, couldn't wait to have my period. It was like we couldn't wait to become adults. And then looking back at it, as adults, there's so much shit that I wish we could have just been kids way longer. But I think that's why I dive into these subjects I have this story called Beginning of the Party, where I follow young kids who are just beginning their journey with drinking alcohol. And I have this story about a portrait series about young girls on the beach talking about what they dream about, becoming women, becoming female, and what it's like today. I think initially the thing about me photographing bodies is about that I'm interested in the mind and in like people's mental health. And the body can sometimes be a way of physically showing mental health, both in like the series about anorexia or like in lots of ways a body expresses how you feel on the inside. It's a bit spacey, but I think that's why the interest in the bodies is also so big for me. It's not just about bodies, but it's a lot about getting into people's minds and sort of getting to get so close to people that you can sort of feel their emotions. I think that's my goal in a lot of my work. I'm really, really happy that there's a place for a photographer like me in museums and galleries as well. Because I think I love my background in documentary photography so much, and I think we should see much more of it. And I like the way that I can mix artistic images in a way that a lot of people actually think some of my photography looks like paintings. So I think I'm starting to work in sort of like a field between documentary and art, but I never compromise in the fact that I don't Photoshop anything out of any images, or I keep the realness of documentary photography, but it's still allowed to hang in galleries and big museums. We've come to a place in history now where my images of sex workers or fat activists are allowed to hang side by side with the kings and queens. And I think a lot of my work and a lot of what we talk about in society is that we're in a battle and we're breaking boundaries and trying to sort of keep changing the rules. But sometimes we could also take a step back and maybe celebrate that actually today we are allowed to have these people hanging next to the kings and queens and prime ministers. We've actually come quite far in the process of who's allowed to have a voice.